Welcome, welcome. Man, am I excited to be back here in this studio today. Hopefully y'all missed me as much as I missed you. It's Tuesday, October 25th, and I have a fun show lined up for today. We have some big news that dropped, I'm not joking, right after I posted my last podcast, right after I left this studio last Thursday. We'll talk about that here pretty soon. Also, I want to introduce a very fun NBA game here on the podcast. It's a game that can be played multiple times throughout the season. It's very fun, and I believe you guys will enjoy it. That'll be up after the big news that we missed. But overall, it's going to be a very fun show. And without further ado, welcome to the Anomaly podcast. I'm your host, Owen Stiftar. Let's talk CMC. Alright, if you've been keeping up with my podcast, you'd know that last Thursday, as I mentioned in the intro, was when I released my last episode. For football fans, it's also the day Christian McCaffrey, all-pro running back for the former Carolina Panthers, he was traded to the San Francisco 49ers. I kid you not, not even an hour after I left that studio, last Thursday, that trade went through, and the rest is history. CMC made his debut with that team last Sunday, and they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, dropping the 49ers to a 3-4 record. Safe to say, he didn't have the best game. He only accumulated 62 total scrimmage yards, no touchdowns. But I don't want you to think for a minute that I'm bashing CMC. If anything, I'm surprised he suited up. For someone that has a reputation for not being available, it's amazing that he was available and that quickly. It's amazing what a good, environment can do to a player like that. But one thing I want to mention is that after the trade, on a 49ers page that I regularly see, fans are reportedly calling CMC the mortgage, and I love it. They say that nicknames are like respect. They are earned, not given. And boy, is that nickname accurate for what San Fran gave up for Christian McCaffrey. I believe it was a second, third, fourth, and a future sixth. That's a lot. That's a lot, especially for a running back in today's game. But nonetheless, I'm happy to see CMC is in a winning situation, though I'm not sure we'll see his statistical numbers be where we're accustomed to seeing them. It's still exciting nonetheless to see a top 5 running back in a lot of people's eyes go to an offense that loves to run the ball and a team that's supposed to be competing for a Super Bowl. But especially his statistical numbers were speaking. I don't expect them to be anything good, aside from the touchdown category, because their next 4 games are tough. You have the Rams, Chargers, Cardinals, and Saints in order. So all of them are respectable defenses. So we'll really get to see how good of a team we'll really get to see how good San Fran really is as a team. And that's what I was trying to say. In these next couple games, I'm not going to bash them for losing to Kansas City. A lot of teams are going to, and a lot of teams have already. But if they really want to contend for a Super Bowl in a division that is not the strongest right now record-wise, I believe they need to pick up at least 3 of these next 4 to really solidify themselves in a lot of people's eyes as Super Bowl contenders. But that's going to be it. That's the big news that we missed, man. CMC, we don't see a player traded of that caliber often, so it's always good to talk about. It's always good to bring to a podcast like this. But without further ado, that's going to do it for the CMC talk. Let's get into my fun NBA 3. All right, the game's just as it sounds. We're going to run through all 30 NBA teams. Don't worry. It's going to be quick. We're going to run through these teams relatively quickly. But nonetheless, all 30 NBA teams, I'm going to give you 3 words. It could be a phrase, a collection of 3 words, whatever. We have 3 words for each and every NBA team, and you'll see why. We're going to start in the Eastern Conference. For both conferences, we're going to go 1 to 15 as the standings are at this moment. At 1:13 on Tuesday, October 25th, these are how the standings lie in both the Eastern and Western Conference, and that's what we're going to use. So, hey, The number one seed in the East, we're going to have Milwaukee. There are three words, as you see: business as usual. 2-0 start to the season, top three defense, despite no Chris Middleton. We're still waiting on his return to the season. Giannis has been Giannis. This team has been dominant, and it's to no one's surprise that they're on top of the East. I know they're only 2 games in. A lot of teams have played 4 by this point, but Milwaukee's top of the conference. It's a sight that we're going to be getting used to seeing, and it's not a surprise. That's why it's business as usual. Same thing, different season. The number 2 seed in the East, we're going to have Boston, and theirs is a new best duo. We're talking, of course, the Tatum and Jaylen Brown duo. They've been on fire to start the NBA season. Jaylen Brown's had one bad game in the points category, right? Because he still had a good game on his impact alone and all that good stuff. But in the points category, he had a 12-point game. Regardless of that, they've both pretty much put up the same numbers every night, whether if it's 25 to 30 points or a little bit more than that. They've both been very, very consistent. And with the success that they had last season as a duo, of course, getting to the finals, right? And both players being probably top 25 players in the NBA, do we have a new best duo? You have a couple arguments here. You could say Bron and AD, but since they won the title, they both haven't been healthy for the most part, and they haven't been successful, right? So that plays a big part into determining for me what the best duo in the NBA is. For PG and Kawhi, that could be another argument. But in the 4 years they've been together, they haven't been healthy, at least at the same time for the most part. And they're both unproven. They haven't really won anything together. They got to the Western Conference Finals with only PG. So, yeah, you could say on paper they have it, but they need to be together to be a duo, right? I think that's self-explanatory. You could say Joel Embiid and James Harden. They're just unproven. Stephen Clay's been one of the best, if not the best duo in the NBA for a good part of the last decade. It was always an argument. But Clay has taken a step back from his injury, and he's just not top 25. I don't even know if he's top 35 anymore. But, nonetheless, they had a great run. They're just a bit older. And I would understand the Giannis and Chris Middleton argument, which is why I don't agree quite yet. I think, I'm not going to say who the best duo is in the NBA, but Giannis and Chris Middleton have an argument, with them winning a championship 2 years ago. Chris Middleton, they were going to take down the Boston Celtics last year if they had Middleton, and they probably would have went to the finals to take on the Golden State Warriors, which, looking back, sucks that we didn't get to see a Milwaukee Golden State finals. But hey, I would understand the Giannis Middleton argument. I'd understand the Tatum Brown argument. And that's the thing about basketball. You have so many different factors that tie in to an argument like this that I would really understand multiple points of view. But hey, Tatum and Brown, I will say, if they're not one, they're top 3 without a doubt. On to Charlotte. As we all expected, the number 3 seed in the East, Charlotte Hornets. Their 3 words are waiting for LaMelo. They had an impressive win over the Hawks last Sunday. Dennis Smith Jr., obviously, he was picked up right before the season, and he's on his revenge tour. Dennis Smith Jr. has looked great. We always knew he had the talent. He just needed keys to the offense. Or not keys to the offense, but he just needed opportunity, right? I'll put it that way. But, nonetheless, Gordon Hayward, Kelly Oubre, Terry Rozier, they've been carrying the load in their own rights each and every night, getting this team to the 3rd seed in the East so far in the season. And despite not having LaMelo, they have the 4th best offense in the NBA. Now, I'm not saying the Charlotte team, when LaMelo comes back, will be contenders, right? But if this team can stay where they're at, and you're bringing back an elite playmaker in LaMelo Ball, right? The overall best player on this team, James Bouknight by that time will take another step. And you're going to have LaMelo with a good 5 or 6 guys around him that can make this team maybe upset worthy in the first round of a playoff series. Do I see that? Not yet. I want to see LaMelo come back from the injury. I want to see the mesh, between these guys. But they have continuity, and they've looked great without LaMelo so far. So you can only expect them to be better when their lead playmaker comes back. Next up, we're going to have the 4 seed Washington Wizards. Tons of questions is the 3 words for them. Tons of questions. Though they're coming off of a loss to the Cavaliers just a couple days ago, they've had a good start to the season. Their defense has been unexpectedly solid. Denny Abdia and Kyle Kuzma, 2 6'9" wings. They've been able to step out on the perimeter, guard bigs. They're basically bigs, well, I guess they're wings in a big man body. You could put it that way. But when they get going, they're exciting to watch. From top to bottom, Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, Monty Morris, and Will Barton, who they picked up in the offseason. Rui Hachimura has had a good start to the year. They have a very talented team, but they're in the same boat of Charlotte, where I don't know if they have enough, right, to be a quote-unquote contender. I can see them. I don't know. My only worry with this team, I'll put it this way. Last year they started off like this. They started off great. They were clicking on all cylinders, and then injuries came into play, and all of the unfortunate stuff, and they ended up missing the playoffs. This year I believe they will make the playoffs, but it will be like a 7-8 seed, and I mean, hey, anything can happen, but this team, with the inconsistency on defense that we've seen the last couple of years with our Bradley Beal-led team, it gives me a lot of questions that need to be answered in the future. And they have a tough schedule coming up, so we'll get to see some answers, right? But nonetheless, Washington, I have tons of questions about their future and their team. Let's see if they can answer them. For Atlanta, we're going to have flock behind Trey, no pun intended. With the addition of DeJounte Murray in the offseason, excuse me, they've looked amazing. The addition has been perfect. They are now a top 10 defense, which was the biggest problem with this team the last couple of years, saying Trae Young is such a defensive liability with his size, strength, all that stuff that in the NBA matters, especially in a 7-game series in the playoffs. But aside from that, DeJounte has got them to a top 10 defense. John Collins has taken a step even. He's been himself a 20-10 guy that brings effort, offense and defense, and he's always going to be a lob threat. Trae Young's always going to be able to run a pick and roll with him, and DeJounte does as well. And that big three has looked amazing for Atlanta so far. And, I mean, not even to mention, with the defense that they've brought in and the defense that they have this year, Trae is an offense by himself, as he proved last season. And the success of this team, even though DeJounte's great, even though Clint Capella and Double O and John Collins and Kevin Huerter, well, not Kevin Huerter, but Bogdanovich, even though these guys are great and they have, their stars in their role, the success of this team will rely on Trae. There's no question about it. So, 1, he has to be healthy, and 2, can his team get the right matchup in the playoffs? That's really the biggest question for me about this Atlanta Hawks team. They need the right matchup, and we'll have to see if that can happen. Obviously, we're a long time away. Next up, we're going to have the, I believe, 6th seed Cleveland Cavaliers, hometown team for me. And their 3 words are entertaining, talented, and hungry. And I know you might say 4 words. I'll restate it then, because I'm realizing that I have a lot of people that will correct me on that. Entertaining, talented, hungry. There you go. Donovan Mitchell, he now has the most points for a Cavalier in their first 3 games with the franchise. I believe he had exactly 100 points. So congrats to Donovan Mitchell. I mean, he's been amazing this season. Unfortunately, early on in the season, I believe it was first game, Donovan or Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland had a eye laceration and he's out for the time being. No timetable for his return. So, I mean, the good thing about it, Donovan Mitchell's always been a regular season player. He's always been able to carry the offense for the Jazz for all those years. I mean, and hey, the team has the best 3-point percentage, free throw percentage. We have a top three defense and a top 3-point differential to start the season. So Donovan Mitchell's done a very good job with the supporting cast of Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and you name it. I mean, Karis LeVert's even looked okay in moments. We've been very exciting to start this season. You might even go as far as saying this is the most exciting team since 2016 for the sole fact that we don't know what will happen with this team. Come playoff time. This team, I mean, can this team be a 4 seed? Can they be a sneaky contender? Or will they just be too young to really compete with the big dogs in the East, so to speak? But, the 2017 team and the 2018 team with LeBron James, yeah, we had LeBron, but it was just LeBron, right? So those teams weren't as exciting, I would say, as this team here. And it's exciting to be a Cavs fan in today's, as of today, it is awesome to be a Cavs fan. It's good to see that we do have a young team, right? We didn't buy our team. We drafted well, and we've made the right trades and acquisitions to put this team in a position to be good for a long time. So, again, entertaining, yes. Talented, you know it. And we're hungry. We're unproven without LeBron James. We can change some. We can change that this season. Next up, we're going to have New York Knicks as a sneaky playoff team. Just like Charlotte, just like the Cavs, and just like Charlotte, there's a lot of questions surrounding these mid-tier teams, I guess, so to speak, in the East. Mid-tier or unproven, really. But for the Knicks, Jalen Brunson has looked good to start the season, and I believe just overall, people underestimate the impact and the value behind having just a consistent point guard, right? You don't necessarily need a Russell Westbrook that's going to go out there and give you a triple-double. You don't necessarily need a Damian Lillard that's going to go out there and give you 30, 35, and 5, right? A consistent point guard for a team like the Knicks is so valuable, right? You're still letting RJ shine and letting Julius Randle shine, and you have multiple young pieces on that team that are able to come in and do what they need to do offensively because of Jalen Brunson and his playmaking ability. But like I mentioned, RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, every single game, it seems like they switch games, right? Who's going to take over? All right, it's a home game, I got it. All right, you got the next two. I got the three after that. It's funny to see them play together. They're not the best fit, but though it may not show up on the scoreboard, points wise, I guess, it seems like they do switch every night who has control of the offense, and it's very interesting to see. I will also say that this Knicks team has they have great depth, right? You have Emmanuel Quickly, Derrick Rose, Cam Reddish, Obi Toppin, Isaiah Hartenstein, who's very underrated. This bench unit is good, and the only thing I'm worried about is their coaching, and I'm worried about if they have enough talent, I guess, star talent, right, to compete with teams in the playoff race. But nonetheless, I can see this team being a very solid team this season, like a Toronto Raptors, which we'll get into next. Toronto, they're one piece away. Nothing's changed since last season, in my eyes. Nick Nurse still plays his starters 40-plus minutes, which, I don't want to wish injuries on anybody, but you're asking for it, right? You're asking for injuries if you're playing your starters 20-plus minutes or 40-plus minutes a night, every single night. You're right. But aside from that, there's been no big changes to the talent on the roster. Really, all they've done is bring in Otto Porter and let Scotty Barnes develop. I mean, the roster is so well-rounded that I believe, we look at this team in a completely different light. If come trade deadline time, let's say Washington or the Thunder are struggling, and they can go out there and grab a Bradley Beal or grab a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, I believe we see this team we view this team in a whole different light. If they can get not even a superstar, but just a star or an all-star on this team, aside from Pascal Siakam. I mean, last time we saw, just a couple years ago, 2019, they did get a superstar, but we saw what a trade, when they went out there and made a big move, we saw what it did for them. Brought them a championship. So I believe they need, they're in a similar spot as they were just a couple years ago. They need to go out there and make a move. I don't care if you give up Fred VanVleet or give up OG Anunoby and some picks. At the end of the day, if you get a championship, that's really all that matters. Next up, we're going to have the Chicago Bulls. And before we switch to that slide, I'm going to say this might come off disrespectful, right? But there's good reason behind it. So let's get into it. The Bulls, not the 90s, right? Now, obviously, I get it. They don't have MJ and Scotty. That's not exactly it's not exactly the point I'm making. What I'm saying is that to be a successful team in this league, to be a true contender in this league, you have to adapt, right? And trust me, long live the midi. It's a very beautiful part of the game of basketball, but it's time for LaVine to take over. It's time for LaVine to be the guy in the offense and not have, I'm stuttering here, but I'm not cutting this out because it's a one-take podcast, right? Zach LaVine, we know the talent he does have offensively. I mean, he's a 25, 6-5 guy every single night, but I believe he needs to be the guy in this offense for them to be relevant, with DeMar more so as a co-star and not two guys at a 50-50 split, if that makes any sense. I don't think it should be a 50-50 split if this team's goal is to succeed in the regular season and the playoffs, right? Otherwise, they'll continue to be a bottom five offense, letting DeMar take, all his shots in the mid-range area. And hey, he can average 25 as a co-star, but let LaVine go out there and get 30. Or go out there and have LaVine get 28 to 30, have DeMar take a step back and get a 20 to 22, Come playoff time, DeMar is going to be more effective in this offense, but for regular season stake, and I just believe for the overall success of this team, for the DeMar DeRozan pickup to not just be a failure, they need to let Zach LaVine take over the offense, let him run it, and let him succeed on the perimeter side of the game. I mean, that's really all I got for Chicago. Andre Drummond's looked okay this season. Patrick Williams has looked okay. I believe just they need something different on the offensive side of the ball, and Zach LaVine having the keys to himself brings that for them. Next up, we're going to have Brooklyn. Consistency is key. They have a 1-2 start to the season. They haven't won a quote-unquote big game yet, playing on opening night and playing against Memphis. Now, it is still early. Let's calm down. I know it's a New York team. Their sales have been down, but it's Kyrie and KD, okay? And this is the first time that they're getting to play a full season together in a couple of years. Ben Simmons has shown flashes of his old self, but he still needs time to get his feet back under him. He needs to get back in game shape, and he needs to just get used to playing basketball in regulation games again. He took a year and a half off, so you got to give him some time there. But depth, it looks better than it has in the KD Kyrie era, right? I'll put it that way. But can it stay consistent enough? That is my biggest question with this team. We know KD and Kyrie against Memphis, I believe they had both 37 plus. So, huge night for KD and Kyrie. Ben Simmons, I know he fouled out yet again, but this team just needs to be consistent. The role players with Seth Curry, when Joe Harris comes back, hopefully he hurries back to the court. But this team just needs to stay consistent And if they can just be within the game, right? If this surrounding unit can keep the game within 5 to 10 points, if you have KD, Kyrie, that team is going to be very hard to beat in a slowed down 7-game series with two of arguably the best two scorers in the game of basketball. So, Brooklyn, consistency is key. Next up, we're going to have Detroit, and they are built around Cade. Perfectly built team around Cade Cunningham. I will preface, for now, right, for where they're at in the point of their rebuild, they are perfectly built around their star point guard, around their number one pick, around their hopeful franchise cornerstone. And, they have scores around him, Jaden Ivey. They have 3-and-D wings in Sadiq Bey and Bojan Bogdanovic. They have defensive-minded bigs on their team, but mainly Isaiah Stewart. The starting lineup is built very nicely in Detroit. They have an exciting future, and at this point, I don't have any expectations for them. My only hope is that they continue to build around Cade and let this young core develop. Next up, we're going to have Philly. Surprisingly lower than we thought, but my 3 words for them: Harden's finally back, right? Harden and Embiid duo, on paper, they look amazing. Flashes of last season, they looked good, more so Embiid than Harden last year. But this year, Harden looks like he has that step back. He looks like he has the feel for the game back. He lost some weight. He seems to be moving quicker. And, obviously, prime Harden, that was such a big part of his game. I will say, they've had a very tough schedule so far this season. They did pick up a win yesterday against the Pacers. It's not a big win, but it's the Pacers. And overall, I think with the pickup of PJ Tucker, you still have 2 stars that there's always going to be an adjustment period. This team still needs time to mesh. They still need time to develop, and expect it to happen quicker than other teams that are in the same predicament. Next up, we're going to have Miami. This one's going to be poking a little fun here, but their star player would enjoy it, I believe. Here's to perfection. Miami, they haven't looked the greatest to start the season, right? It's safe to say that. Both sides of the ball, offensively, defensively. We already knew this team wasn't a regular season team, but they haven't looked the greatest. After the first win of their season, I will say, which was, I believe, end of last week, Jimmy Butler took to Instagram. He posted their first win, a picture congratulating the team with their first win, and his caption that he used was, "Here's to 80-2." I was going to use 80-2 as their 3 words, right? But they lost again. And that 80-2 signified they wouldn't lose again this season. Obviously, he wasn't serious, but it's funny nonetheless. And, hey, here's to 79-3 is what I proposed to Jimmy Butler and the Heat. We'll have to see. They did just lose to Toronto, but no doubt in my mind this team can turn it around and be a relevant regular season team. Next up, we're going to have Indiana, the 14 seed. Mine for them is for a player specifically, and I love it. Everyone before me. Now, obviously, that's paraphrased, but we're talking, of course, here about Benedict Mathurin, guard out of Arizona. He was the Pacers' number 6 pick. He had an interview recently where he said he remembered everyone that was drafted before him, which is only like 5 people. Exactly 5 people. But Mathurin said he's going to show those teams ahead of him why they messed up, why they should have picked him over the other talent. We've heard that from a lot of people in the past. I remember all of these people before me. And, he's looked great so far. Scoring the ball at will. But that needs to stay consistent for a statement like that to be relevant, right? And, hey, Tyrese is doing what everyone thought he would be doing to this point. He's still a front runner for the Most Improved Player award. He's looked great next to Benedict Mathurin has looked great next to Tyrese, I should say. And, however, You know, I mean, there's there's trade rumors going around about this team each and every day about O'Shea Brissett, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner. They started 1-3 this season. I don't expect much from this team, but I will say, Benedict Mathurin, hopefully that statement doesn't come to bite him in the back. And hopefully Tyrese can continue to improve his game. And that's really all I have for the Pacers. Next up, we're going to have Orlando. Paolo's your guy. Orlando has a superstar in their hands. Usually it takes some time for rookies in any professional league at that point. For them to find their way, right, to get comfortable and to excel at this level, at the professional level. But Paolo has gotten right to it. I mean, he's wasted no time. I don't care about the record for this team. I don't care if they win 10 games, right, if they're one of the worst teams ever. We didn't expect this team to be good. Nobody predicted that this Magic team, unless you're a Magic fan, to go to the playoffs. So it's good to see Bol Bol back. It's good to see John Isaac finally out there after a couple years of absence, and they're doing good at that. But nonetheless, Paolo is your guy. You need to continue to build around him, and you should be successful. Without further ado, we're going to take a little break, and we're going to move to the Western Conference. All right, the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, to no one's surprise, that's a joke, by the way, is Portland. And their 3 words are Dame Time's back. Dame Time is back in Portland. And just like we also expected, Portland is the 1 seed. They took down Denver yesterday in a very impressive win. Denver is seen by many as a title favorite. It did not matter to Anthony Simons, and it did not matter to Damian Lillard. They both went for 30. I think technically Ant ended up with 29, but we're gonna round that up for him. But with his injury, people quickly forgot who Damian Lillard was, and Damian Lillard last year, there was you always have these sports networks and TV shows that live in the moment, right? Recency bias is crazy within those television shows and just in the media in general. I mean, people really forget that Damian Lillard at Steph Curry's prime was questioning for who's the best point guard in the league. And, a 4-0 start to this season after coming off an injury. They're the only undefeated team left in the West. And in the West, I might add. I wanted to say that twice. Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, Ant has continued to grow into he's continued to grow, take a leap forward offensively. Jeremy Grant obviously was an offseason acquisition. He's come in, he's looked great, and it's really funny to watch. There's clips going around of Damian Lillard on the bench, and Jeremy Grant's had some crazy blocks this season, crazy defensive plays, and it's funny to see Damian just sitting on the bench and he'll smile, right, and he'll just. I can only assume that he's thinking, man, I've never had this before. I've never had the guy that's crazy athletic. He's going to go make these defensive plays consistently. And, it's always good to see someone like that. Though I don't expect them to be relevant come playoff time, it's always good to see Damian Lillard back in action. And, the only worry is, do they have enough to compete? Like I just said, they have talent. Just don't know if they have enough. The number 2 seed, as we all expected yet again, the San Antonio Spurs. Their 3 words are tank for victor. The power of a good coach this is the prime example. Greg Popovich, in a lot of people's eyes, is the greatest coach of all time. And with this 3-1 start, it really shows the power of a good head coach, of good scheming, and I guess execution. But there was the viral clip going out before the season. Bettors were saying, they asked Pop, hey, what do you think about bettors taking the Spurs to win the finals? Coach Pop, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. That's what we do around here. We paraphrase. Coach Pop was like, don't bet on us. Basically saying we're not going to be relevant this season. We're very young, and we're not title favorites, right? Or contenders at that. But Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, they've showed promise, and surprisingly, even though they've had a 3-1 start, they're one of the worst defenses, which is very unlike Coach Popovich. Next up, we're going to have Memphis. Their 3 words, Ja for MVP. 3-1 start to the season. Big win over Brooklyn. Bane and Ja went for 37 plus, I believe. And Ja is he's the definition of a culture change. He's dynamic, he's fresh, and he's injected that Memphis franchise with excitement that they haven't had in a very long time, maybe ever. Because, even those grit and grind teams, they weren't necessarily exciting to watch, right? They were just consistent and they were good. But Ja has his team being good and exciting. So, good time to be a Memphis fan. Next up, we're going to have Utah. Excuse me. Theirs is Face the Music. If you guys don't know, the Utah Jazz, Face the Music. I thought it was fitting. But this team cannot afford, in my opinion, to not get a top 2 pick. They're had an okay start to the season. I think they're 3-1. But let's be real here. Don't be delusional. They don't have enough talent to really do anything. And they're only going to ruin their own future by not taking the tank seriously, right? Now, hey, I'm not saying that this team, because they're 3-1, they're going to be a contender. They're not. They're going to fall off. I just don't want this team to win, let's say, 30 games or 28 games, and come draft lottery time, they're the 6th seed. Or they have the 6th best odds or the 7th best odds, where that might be where they land up, and not a 1 or 2 where they can get a franchise-changing piece. So that's it for the Jazz. Next up, we're going to have the Phoenix Suns. Depth is concerning. They're always going to be a great regular season team with their big 3 of Chris Paul, of Devin Booker, of DeAndre Ayton. But the lack of depth might land this team in the 5 to 6 seed range. I might sound crazy, but with the loss of Jay Crowder, obviously, by the way, trade Jay Crowder. Don't have him just sit there and waste his NBA season. Trade him. You can always get picks out of it. But nonetheless, the loss of Jay Crowder is, I guess, underrated. And though Cam Johnson and though Mikal Bridges, they've looked good this season. I just don't know if they'll have enough come playoff time. We'll have to see, But I'm very interested in where this team is at come trade deadline time. Obviously there was rumors about DeAndre Ayton wanting to be out. I believe he signed with Indiana. He doesn't want to be there, and he still might not want to. Obviously, right before the season started, DeAndre Ayton said that he was first asked in an interview. He's like, "How did you feel about getting your contract?" DeAndre Ayton basically was like, yeah, it's money. He was excited pretty much just to have the money, and he was like, that's pretty much the only reason I came back. He didn't really have a choice because he was a restricted free agent, but you could tell he wanted out. A couple days later, he pretty much said that he talked to Monty Williams and everything was settled out. We'll have to see, they can say everything they want in front of the media, but come trade deadline time, if this team is struggling, I wouldn't be shocked to see a DeAndre Ayton trade. Not including DeAndre, I would like this team to maybe go out there and get a Kobe White, right? Right now, I think they need a backup guard or a wing, especially with the losses that they've had, desperately. And maybe the Bulls, obviously the Bulls have moved on from Kobe White. They would like to give the keys more so to Ayu Dosunmu. And Kobe White last year of his deal, I would not be shocked if I saw a Jay Crowder, Kobe White swap or something of that sort. Obviously, the Suns would probably throw in picks. But I would not be shocked to see a swap of that sort sometime this season. Next up, we're going to have Golden State. Quest for the 5th. We'll redo that, I guess. I guess it technically added a word. Quest for fifth. Golden State, they're going for their fifth championship with this core of Steph Curry, Clay, and Draymond. Um, I don't really want to focus on the season specifically. I kind of just want to talk about the Warriors as a whole. Is this the best managed team of all time? From 2009 to now, they have drafted well. When it came time for trades, they chose to keep Steph Curry over Monte Ellis. They gave their core time to develop. They brought in Iguodala, who was an all-star. They got him to buy in and take a bench role. They won their first championship in 2015, as we all know. They lost the following year. Big deal, right? We're just going to bring in Kevin Durant. They won the next two. Kevin Durant left. They drafted well again, and they won another. And they've always been this revolving door for veteran role players. They brought in Otto Porter last season. They had Andrew Bogut and David West for many, many years. They had Sean Livingston, Barbosa for a short period of time. Along with those vet players that they bring in, they still have a great young team that is growing into their own today. I don't believe something like this will be replicated for a very long time. Their ability to be a revolving door, bringing in talent and letting go of talent at the right time, and just being consistent for this long, winning championships at that, I am I am jealous of this Warriors run, and I always will be. Next up, we're going to have the Los Angeles Clippers. Load manage carefully. I don't believe we will see the best version of this team until the playoffs due to load management, and hey, health is key, especially with this team. PG, Kawhi, they need rest. I mean, hey, John Wall even needs rest. He's coming back off of not playing for a long time. I do see this team being a relevant team regular season, in the regular season, just because of the overall talent that they have. But I just want them to be careful because come playoff time, if we only see, let's say, half the games of the season played with PG, Kawhi, John Wall, everybody at the same time, it's going to be concerning, when rotations are shortened and we go to a 7-game series where you're only running 7 or 8 people. So I just want them to load manage carefully, get Kawhi and PG in the games together and win the games that you're supposed to. So even if it's only PG or if it's only Kawhi, you should be able to go out there and beat the Kings and beat Houston, teams of that sort. Next up, we're going to have the New Orleans Pelicans. Pelicans are good for the first time in a while. The Pelicans are indeed good. The other night, though, I will say there was a scary fall by Zion, but he should be good. That's always good news. For tonight, I believe Brandon Ingram and Zion are out against Dallas, so they're going to pick up a loss most likely. But nonetheless, they blew out the Nets in the first game of the season. If there's still questions around it, Zion and Brandon Ingram are franchise cornerstones. They are your guys to build around. If that was even in question, now I believe it's solidified. But with the supporting cast of McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas, who's very underrated, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Grand Theft Auto, that's might be the best nickname in the NBA. And Trey Murphy. I want to show some love to Trey Murphy. Those guys really make this team dangerous, and they're really the biggest question this season. Them and the Cavs probably are the two teams I'm most interested to see where they end up. For Dallas, another man's treasure. There's the famous quote that's going around for, centuries on end. One man's trash is another man's treasure. I'm talking, of course, here about Christian Wood. Christian Wood was traded from Houston for basically a bag of chips. Maybe a drink on the side. But regardless, he was traded for nothing to Houston, or from Houston to Dallas, excuse me, and he's looked amazing. He brings a lot of depth. We talked about it exclusively in the awards prediction video about Luka and this team needing bench depth, and with the Dinwiddie Christian Wood combo off the bench, they've looked amazing. I mean, Christian Wood is going to be that 20 and 10 guy that we predicted him to be, and he really makes this Mavericks team dangerous, especially in the clutch time. He can guard, not effectively, but I believe he can. I'd be confident if he switched out 1 through 5, if he can hold his own for a couple possessions. There's a lot of depth here in Dallas. Of course, Luka is Luka. He's been amazing. They blew out Memphis, by 41, I believe. So this Dallas team is Dallas. They're the same team as last year with the addition of Christian Wood, and apparently that's going to be a bigger difference than we think. Next up, we're going to have Minnesota. Rudy's been great. Of course, we're talking about Rudy Gay. Oh, man, that was probably a topic back in 2013. Of course, we're not talking about Rudy Gay. We're talking about Rudy Gobert. There was a big trade this offseason. I think it was four unprotected picks and I believe 6 total with pick swaps that the Minnesota Timberwolves made with the Utah Jazz. We covered that in the awards prediction video. But Rudy, he's 15. He's averaging his 15-15, 2 blocks a game. His impact goes beyond numbers. And Minnesota's the team. They're leading the league in rebounds. Their defensive numbers aren't there statistically. I believe they're an average or below average defense as of now. But I'm expecting that to change with Rudy Gobert. And, anything can happen. But at the end of the day, this team needs time, just like other teams. They made changes to their team, and they need time to mesh. Excuse me. And also, before we move on, that crossover from D'Angelo Russell on Mike Conley was nasty. I just wanted to put it out there. Next up, we're going to have Denver. They're out for blood. Denver, no pun intended, they've had a rocky start to the season. If you don't know, that's their mascot name. But they took down the reigning champs, pretty easily too, early on in the season. They were up by 25 at one point. And throughout the history of this Warriors run, we know that they're notorious for great third quarter runs, right? No matter if they're down or if they're up, they always come out in that third quarter on fire, and they really either blow the game open or they regain the lead. But this Denver team managed, they weathered the storm, and they ended up coming out with the win there. But the rocky part of the season comes with, yes, they beat the Warriors, right? But they've also lost to Portland and Utah, which are 2 teams that have really half the talent that, top to bottom that Denver does. So that's concerning. But Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are back. They are coming off of injuries and missed time. They need to get their feet wet again. And they have looked good in their time. With those guys being back, you can only expect them to get better. And it's hard to not see them as possible title favorites. Houston, take off, Jalen. Again, no pun intended. But I had to do it because they are the Rockets. But they just picked up their first win of the season. Jalen's been one of the lone bright spots so far, and he's really taken a step offensively. But with a bottom 5 defense and seemingly no effort from either side of the ball when they go down in games by more than 10, it's going to be hard to manage many wins this season. I expect them to drop even from where they're at now. Next up, we're going to have Sacramento. They are in right direction. Unfortunately, an 0-3 start to the season. They may not get their first win until Halloween with Memphis and Miami in their next 2 games. It's still a puzzling move last season that they traded Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis. I get it. You want to bring your fan base a playoff appearance, right? But even if they make the playoffs or the play-in, are they really going to win or make it out of any round. That's the questions they need to answer. But hey, this team pulling off a trade like that, giving up a young star in Tyrese Halliburton, they need to at least get a play-in spot this season. And if they can turn it around, Fox could possibly be an all-star candidate this season. Obviously, we're a long ways away from February where they do all-star activities. But, hey, I believe if they can be somewhat relevant, give De'Aaron Fox his first all-star appearance. But overall, the defense needs to catch up to their offense. It's no surprise with Fox and Sabonis being subpar defenders. And overall, they need to be able to close games. That's really all there is to it for Sacramento. Next up, we have the oh-so-famous Los Angeles Lakers. Theirs is fit over name. Russ needs to be traded, and traded pretty much now. If the Indiana deal is on the table for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, take it. There's really no questions behind that. I believe if that trade can get pulled off, we view this team in a whole new light. You have a lineup of Pat Bev, Buddy Hield, LeBron, AD, and Miles Turner. We're looking at that team a little differently. And it's got to get to a point where we can't keep wasting the last couple years of LeBron that we have. So, but time and time again, it is proven that you can't just get a bunch of well-known names and throw them together expecting it to work. For example, if you need one, James Harden, Kyrie, Durant. Together, yes, they were 20-2, but come playoff time, yes, they had health issues and all that, but you can't just throw names together. Hey, even this Lakers team, it's proving that you can't get Russell Westbrook and expect his career flaws to just vanish. You can't expect him to turn into a shooter and throw him next to LeBron James and AD, expecting it to work. Nobody expected this to work, really, after that trade was made. They've stuck with them, and they're suffering because of it. The last seed in the West, before we get out of here, OKC, it's time to worry. Yes, they are a rebuilding team, but when will the losing be too much for Shai Gilgeous? Hey, foreign-born players typically don't find their way out of certain situations, right? Being from Canada, we're talking about Shai, I don't see him just walking up to the front office and being like, hey, get me out of here. He did recently sign a big deal. He's under contract until the 2026-2027 season, but that's never stopped stars before. Remember back then when Blake Griffin, he signed a 4 or 5 year deal with the Clippers. A year into the deal, he was shipped. Or I don't remember if it was a year or just halfway through the first season, he was shipped out to Detroit. Shai Gilgeous, I get it. There's pride in being loyal, and he does have talent like no other, or at least not like a lot, right? But I wouldn't be shocked if after this season, or maybe next, Shai's going to be wanting to get out of there. He can't keep winning 15 games a season every single season and be content with that. That's going to do it, though. For our 3-word game, I know it was long. I didn't expect it to, have this many tangents and get off on a side like that. But hey, 30 NBA teams, those are your 3 words for each team so far this season. Let's transition to the close. As we come to a close, I just wanted to send a special thanks out to you guys. The support has been amazing. The support has been awesome, even though we're only 4 episodes in now. This will obviously go up today. But if you haven't supported the channel yet and you would like to, go over and follow the Instagram on the screen. If you don't have an Instagram, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, be able to say that you were one of the first, because this is going to be big one day. We're going to have a community that's going to gradually build over time. Sure, it might not be tomorrow or a month from now, but this is going to be big. And I'm speaking it into fruition, I guess. I'm putting it out there. I really believe in this podcast. I really appreciate the support, and I believe we will make it big one day. But I can't do it without you guys. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you for listening once again. I will see you guys on Thursday, where we will cover Thursday night, give out my picks of the week, and cover the Week 8 waivers. Until then, I love you guys. Take care.